Hey, Mr. Thompson here. We are looking at Standard 1 in U.S. history. This is where we compare and contrast the development of English settlement and colonization during the 17th century, also the 1600s. Within this standard, we're specifically looking at how mercantilism and the transatlantic trade led to the development of these colonies. Many English colonists came to North America searching for religious freedom and political opportunity, but economic gain was a huge influence for these colonists and the mother country. So investors were taking their money and putting it in these colonial opportunities. There was risk, but where there's risk, there's reward. And of course, England, so the mother country, was thinking to use these colonies as a way to gain resources, so extract resources from the colonies, bring them back to England to make goods, and then they could acquire wealth and power from their colonies. England being the mother country. So by the 1650s, England was just all about this transatlantic trade based on mercantilism. Mercantilism is an economic theory where a country's imports are reduced, so the things that that country is buying, while expanding and growing their exports, so the things that that country sells. And this produces great wealth. They're like, show me the money. Show me the money, mercantilism. That's what happens, the product of mercantilism. When your exports, so the items you're selling, are greater than your imports, the things that you're buying. During the 16th and 17th century, the European world was super competitive, and wealth equaled power in that day. So whoever had the most wealth had the most power. And that's what England was going after through this mercantilism economic theory. So this mercantilism inspired these European governments to adopt this economic theory, to use these American colonies as sources of raw materials that England didn't have. So essentially take these sources from North America back to England and then make those items, manufacture those items in England, and then now that finished product, that finished good, gets sold back to the colonies. So essentially the colonies have this pure raw material, gets shipped back to the mother country, England. England makes it, they tinker with it, make the produced finished good, and then they send that good back to the colony. Some examples of these important resources that England used from the colonies, that they took from their American colonies: lumber, sugar, wool, tobacco, rice, and indigo. This produced a very favorable trade balance for England through this colonial arrangement of using the raw materials from the colonies that were scarce back in England, and so taking them from the colonies, producing the good, and then selling it back to the colonists in North America, because they had a ready market in the North American colonies, because those colonists needed those goods. They didn't have any of those manufactured goods, and where'd they get them from? The mother country in England. In this arrangement, England was set up to prosper, so maximize England's potential while forgetting about the colonies and the colonies prospering themselves. The colonies existed to enrich the mother country. in this mercantilism system through this transatlantic trade. So England would set up these different restrictive policies on the colonies and labor arrangements to ensure that England was first and the colonies were. For example, England came up with the Navigation Acts in the mid-1600s. And so these Navigation Acts were designed to make sure that the colonies did not compete with the mother country. And they did this through 3 specific regulations or rules with this transatlantic trade. So the first rule of the Navigation Acts, we do not talk about the Navigation Acts, just kidding. So first they said all goods shipped to and from English North America had to travel on English ships. Second, they said any good imported from Europe, so any good brought in from Europe, had to be processed through an English port. And third, most colonial resources had to be exported to England. So they had to be sold to England. Couldn't sell it to another country. You could only sell it to the mother country. So the Navigation Acts, they really restricted the profits, so that money, that the colonists could make off of these products. They also hindered the development of large-scale manufacturing happening in the colonies. And they forced colonists to pay super high prices for goods that they could only buy from England. Before I hate on the Navigation Acts too much, a positive from the Navigation Acts was that shipbuilding became a viable industry in New England. Because the Navigation Acts required all goods to travel on English ships, now there was instant demand for English ships. And what did they have in North America? Lumber. There was lumber all over the place, so now they could use that lumber to build English ships. Boom. Shipbuilding industry in New England. Way to go, Navigation Acts. Well, sort of. Another effect of the Navigation Acts was increased smuggling of goods into North America by colonists who said, you know what, I don't care that it's illegal. I want to try and make as much money as I can, so I'm just going to smuggle these items in and you won't even know about it. Hey, smuggling's not cool. England's transatlantic trade really prospered under the mercantilist system. Transatlantic trade, sometimes referred to as triangular trade, often took a 3-step voyage around the Atlantic rim. First, you had English ships loaded up with cloth, rum, other manufactured goods, and then they sailed down to Africa and were traded for Africans as part of the slave trade. Then, in the Middle Passage, slaves were transported on a brutal voyage to the Americas and then sold there as a forced labor commodity to colonial landowners. Then the third step of the journey was these raw materials being shipped back to England to create these manufactured goods that would then start the cycle all over again. Colonial labor was critical for England to produce the manufactured goods that they wanted. Labor needs were first filled by indentured servants and then later filled permanently by enslaved Africans. Indentured servants were typically lower class Englishmen that couldn't actually afford to pay for the voyage over to North America. But they saw life in the colonies as a way for economic opportunity and economic advancement that they would never have in England. So these indentured servants worked for a landowner in exchange for the price of the voyage over to North America. In this deal, the landowner got labor while the indentured servant got the future opportunity to acquire land after working off the debt in roughly 4 to 7 years. However, this created tension because the continual need to supply land to all these newly freed indentured servants was getting old for these landowners. They didn't like it. They liked the free labor, but they didn't like it when, your debt's paid off, here's your land. Come on, man. African slaves were introduced as a labor source in 1619. Eventually, plantation owners came to rely on these African slaves as a more profitable and renewable source of labor. England developed these resource-producing colonies in North America primarily to fuel mercantilism, to acquire wealth and power over their European rivals. The resulting transatlantic trade system, triangular trade system, was regulated through the Navigation Acts and led to various labor sources being used by the colonists in order to meet the resource demand of England. England's all like, nom, 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 I want more, I need more resources. Colonists are like, I can't do it, I'm dying here, bro. You took all our lumber. Why you gotta take my indigo, yo? My indigo, yo! That sums up Standard 1 for U.S. history, Element A, where we looked at mercantilism and transatlantic trade for the development of colonies.